So for mastering, a lot of people still might be confused about what mastering is and what it accomplishes. It's probably the most technical and difficult part of the production process, so I understand the concern. It accomplishes two things. It allows us to balance the level and the tone of your audio file throughout the entire book. We make sure that each chapter sounds the same as the previous one, so that the continuity and the flow of your sound doesn't have radical changes throughout. And the other thing we do is we raise the overall book's volume to an optimal level so that your narration is as clear as can be and it's competitive audio-wise with the rest of the content that we sell on Audible. It's very important for your guys' sales, in fact, because a poorly mastered book will often contribute to a lower rating, even if the listener isn't aware that the mastering is what caused it. Clarity of your voice is like one of the most important things about your narration, and even a well-enunciated, really beautiful read, if it's not mastered well, might not come across to the listener as well as it could. Just keep in mind that when you're mastering, I referred to this earlier, it's not done to make a bad recording sound good. It's to make a great recording sound even better. You can't really fix anything in post in mastering. You can do some things, but you're limited. The best way to get a good product is to start with a good record from the very beginning. Some tips. If you hear noises that you want to edit out while you're mastering, stop mastering, because you haven't finished your edits then. The first thing I'd recommend doing is writing down the time code at where you heard the problem and close the mastering session, save none of your work, start over again. Because if your edits haven't been completely made, then you aren't working on the most reliable information about your audio as possible. You need to make sure that all edits are made before you start mastering. And on that note, once you finish your edit, find the loudness measurements of each audio file that you're working on, each chapter, and make sure that you're grouping all of those recording sessions together. For instance, if you find that day 1 and day 3 have very similar loudness levels, then you can put day 1 and day 3's records in the same mastering session so that you're impacting both days of your recording and not just one. It's a really good time saver. When you're doing your mastering, what you want to avoid is using a lot of plugins. There's only really 3 tools you need to use to master, and anything on this list here should be avoided. Noise reduction software is a really problematic thing. We find a lot of producers sending in audio that's heavily noise reduced, and what that does is it actually does a lot more harm than good to your audio, and I'll explain why in a second. Click and pop removers are of a similar nature. They will be effective to some extent, but we find that it takes away more good content than it does remove bad. And the same with gating. Gating is a really easy way to get a QA notice from us. If you don't know what any of these things are, it's probably, honestly, at this point, for the best. Don't even look into it, because a lot of people think that this stuff will save time. It save a bad recording. It doesn't. These things are not effective ways to fix your recording. So anything listed here should just be avoided in general for mastering. When you perform a master, in order to not get an audio review notice from the quality assurance team, the best thing to do is to follow this series of plugins and to do it in this order. There are 3 things that any well-recorded audiobook should have done to it. The first is equalization. What that is it's a program that will process the frequency of your audio recording in some way that you fashion it. For example, one person had mentioned the roll-off concept. When you cut bass to reduce any kind of rumble, that is actually rolling off the bass. That's how audio people refer to that concept. And the same exists for the high frequencies. If you have hiss in your audio, a really effective way to actually just kind of get rid of all of it is to roll off the highs. If you are going to be in the mastering intensive, feel free to bring that up, and whoever it is that you're working with will be able to show you how to accomplish that. The second thing that we do is normalize. To bring up the overall volume of the audio file, what this does is it allows you to stretch the dynamic range of your audio depending upon a value that you set. So in essence, you can use a normalizer to get the most volume out of your recording possible. But that doesn't often bring up the volume enough in the audio. The third thing you might want to try is compression. So what this does is it will reduce the loudest peaks of your audio. And then what that lets you do is you kind of squash the audio. So then you have an opportunity to bring it up further. With that being said, I strongly suggest that you never touch the volume controls on your DAW while you're mastering. It will serve only to confuse you. If you hear something and it's not loud enough on a normal listening level, that's your indication that you need to make it louder. It should not be an indication that you're going to turn up your headphone level or that you're going to turn up your audio files level. Compression will allow you, when used correctly, to actually fix that problem without the need to hear any better. The one thing you're going to want to know when you move on is that you want to make sure that each master meets your file level audio submission requirements. That's the second section of the audio submission requirements webpage. Every single mastering requirement is in that section. So, as I alluded to earlier, we have this new document that will be much more effective than I at explaining how to encode your audio correctly. The reason why we made this document is because it's a pretty cut and dry thing. You just have to check some boxes, select some things in a menu. There's not much of a technique to it. It's more about just kind of knowing how to do it. So we gave you a step-by-step guide, and if you don't find it in your packets, it should be there. But if you don't find it, it's easily available on the acx.com website.